Hello, welcome to the programme. No idea what we're going to talk about this week. We all get passionate and hot-headed about our football, and that's the way it should be because it matters to us. It matters to us a lot. But, do you know, I thought the best way of tackling this week in Sheffield football was to get two of the calmer heads I know. If you were selecting a team of pundits, you need a little bit of assurance, a bit of calmness. So I've selected very carefully because I think the guys that we've got on the show this week, their words will carry more weight because of that calmness. At a time in Sheffield football where Sheffield United are almost certainly going to be relegated from the Premier League, it's looking increasingly certain that Sheffield Wednesday will drop from the Championship. And if those two things are not bad enough, the City this week has lost one of the greatest managers in its history in Chris Wilder. So to discuss all that, I'm introducing Kevin Gage and Jon Newsome, both very well known to our viewers, former players par excellence and now pundits par excellence as well. Fellas, I always bring you in, don't I, when there's nothing to talk about. Kevin, you first. Chris Wilder. When is a shock not a shock? This one wasn't really, but it doesn't reduce the sadness, not just for Sheffield United, but I think for Sheffield football in the round that it's come to this. Did you see it coming?
In all honesty, I think we probably did see it coming because we heard little snippets of information and we were reading between the lines of what was going on behind the scenes, and taking away how, let's face it, badly we've performed on the pitch. Off the pitch, it became clear that it wasn't a happy camp, and it hasn't been for a while. I think the shock to everybody was it appeared to be less of an issue after they all met and they ironed out their differences, and seemingly everybody had accepted relegation. All the Blades fans had accepted relegation. I think some of the players had accepted relegation, and certainly the manager as well. And it seemed to be that we were just going to play out the season and we would all press the reset button and we'd all start again next season. So I think the timing was very, very strange. But I think overall, I think it was something we all kind of expected deep down.
Jon, despite being a former Sheffield Wednesday player, you look at Sheffield United closely. You know Chris Wilder very well, as most people in this city do, because he's got a terrific network of friends, both in the game and socially as well. Mutual consent, Jon. Did he walk or was he sacked?
Well, it was mutual consent, wasn't it? It just papers over the realism of what's gone on with the football club and with Chris, I think. Difficult for me to go into detail, really, because it's I don't think it's my place. But from the outside looking in, I think we could see that the communication between the owner and the board and Chris was obviously breaking down, wasn't it? And I always find that seems to be the sort of like the last part of a manager's tenure or anything, any form of relationship where I think when communication starts breaking down and parties stop talking to each other or don't like what the other one's saying, I think that you're on a very, very rocky road. And we all know how football works. The fact that I think it got to the point where there had to be some kind of agreement made for Chris to be out of the football club, and that's the be all and end all of it. And they stick the mutual agreement over the top of it, and everybody sort of like dusts themselves down and gets on with it.
Yeah, that agreement took quite a little while to hammer out, it would appear, because the story was out there that he was going a good 48 hours before he actually did. Do you think the parties at the end of the day emerged in what for them would be a satisfactory position?
again, really difficult to say because I don't know the ins and outs of what went off. You know, I know quite a bit, but I don't know it all. Again, you know, you've got, it's like a divorce, isn't it? You know, you've got two parties that are at loggerheads, and they have to come to some agreement. And is either party happy? If you'd have asked them that question at the start of this season, if you said to the owner, to the Prince, you know, will you be happy if Chris Wilder's not your manager at the end of this season? He'd have said no. And I'm sure if you asked Chris, you know, would you be happy if you weren't the manager of Sheffield United at the end of this season? He'd have said no as well. So, are either party happy? I think as time went on, and we could see, you know, the reports coming through that it was going to happen, there had to be something come out. Is it satisfactory? You can see the response on social media. You can see a response on Twitter and all these places. You know, majority of Sheffield United fans aren't happy. And in my opinion, I think it's a big mistake from the football club. You know, I really do. You know, what Chris has done at that club is unprecedented, really. You know, he's dragged them by the teeth from lowly in Division 1 as well, and got them to the realms of you know, touching on European football last year. And that acceleration and that success, sometimes you're a victim of your own success, aren't you? You know, I know it's a cliche again, but you know, the club's been accelerated forward so quickly. You know, I've had discussions when people talked about their academy and things like that. Well, you know, 4 years ago they were trying to entice young lads to go to the football club as a Division 1 football club, and 4 years later they're a Premier League football club. And that bar's been risen massively, and the expectation level gets risen massively. And so, yeah, I think you know, nobody can take away what he's done for the club. I really do think it's a shame, but I think it's a big mistake, a big error on the owner's part.
John, you mentioned the analogy of a divorce there, and where a divorce is concerned, there's plenty of emotion. Kevin, nobody would have been sadder than you, having eulogised over the progress the Blades have made under this manager at his departure now.
Yeah, John's hit the nail on the head there, really. It is a bit like a divorce. And unfortunately, it's a bloody messy one as well, isn't it? The thing for me is we seem to have dragged our dirty washing. You know, every pundit in the country is talking about the unfairness of it, and it's the wrong thing to do. And you know, we're getting disparaging comments about everything connecting with Sheffield United. And the good thing is, it's been picked up on just what a fantastic achievement Chris has done there in the last 4 years. But yeah, you're right to touch on that, Alan. From me personally, it's not only have we just got the promotions and achieved, you know, a high position in the Premier League, challenging for the top 6 even, but it's the style and the panache that we've showed in doing so. You know, the standard of the football was quite amazing. You know, it was just week in, week out. We were competing with the very, very best in the Premier League and competing on level terms and outplaying them at times. And that's having obviously romped through League One and then more than held our own in the Championship and obviously gone on and got promotion in our second year. So it's a double whammy, really. We've lost our talisman and a superb manager, which everybody agrees on. But we're losing that style of football as well, I think. We're losing that special brand of football that Chris managed to conjure up from his teams. It really was quite remarkable.
Yeah, and as we look to the future and stock take now, so many experts, former players, top pundits, dare I say, journalists, John, they can't be wrong, can they? I mean, the comment that really struck a chord most with me was maybe the top manager in the English game and one of the leading managers in the world, Pep Guardiola of Manchester City, saying, look, effectively, he was saying, look, if Chris Wilder and I swap places, or swap clubs, we'd swap places in the league table. John, that struck a chord with me. He's absolutely right, surely.
Of course he is, yeah. I mean, I also think you emphasise the point of, football people that know football. And we've said it a long time, haven't we? It's, bless his cotton socks, people who've said it before, it's a funny old game, and it really is a funny old game. And it's very difficult when you're involved in football, I think, because it's hard to say to people that you don't understand the game unless you're involved in it and you've been involved in it and you see how it doesn't make sense and how ridiculous it is. And then for someone like Pep to come out and say that, I think, we can all agree with him and we all sympathise that he's making a very, very valid point. I think one of the other things as well, for Sheffield United this year, and I do watch them because I watch them with the intent of, obviously, I'm a friend of Chris's and I wanted Chris to do well. But you've also, in sport, and we've all been there, you've got to have a bit of luck as well, and I just felt that the tide had turned for Sheffield United this year in terms of that. They were on the wrong end of a few decisions. They've got some bad injuries to key players. And when you're fighting at the top of the Premier League, and when you're fighting at the top of your game, like the Premier League is, you need your very, very best out there. And they're not a big enough club to carry a massive squad with massive strength in depth, because they're the new boys to the league, to the Premier League, and to amass those kind of players takes a period of time. And so I think there were a few things that went against, and as we say, when Guardiola's coming out with that, I think he does strike a chord with you. But I'm sure he'll be back. I'm sure he'll dust himself down, and I've not spoken to him about it, but from a personal point of view, you sort of like use those things, don't you? When when you faced negativity, or you faced what you feel you're on the wrong end of a decision, you try and use that as a positive, and I'm sure that's what he'll do.
Yeah, I think people in life who say I haven't got anything to prove to anybody are completely wrong. I think we're all motivated by that in what they do. Kevin, some people have suggested that Chris Wilder effectively forced his own exit by speaking out. Let's look at it like this. He wasn't personally critical to anybody. He just basically, honestly, answered questions about the future direction of the club, which was certainly interpreted as criticism. If he'd have not wanted to stay at Sheffield United, could he not simply have kept quiet? And was he effectively risking his employment in some quarters with chairman who might think, oh, that's a manager who speaks out, I don't fancy that? Didn't that demonstrate how badly he wanted to stay, Kevin?
Yeah, 100%. I think we all know Chris, and he's not the type of manager who will settle for second best. He wanted the best for Sheffield United, and I think he thought he had to push the people in the boardroom and in charge to achieve, the ultimate aim, which was going to be, Premiership survival and a secure, sound club. So yeah, he's right to ask for the things he asked for. And as I mentioned previously, 5 minutes ago, we thought all these issues had been resolved when Chris wanted to keep his best players. They wanted the upgrade of the training ground. There was talk of he didn't want a director of football. There was all the hoo-ha about that. He wanted final say on transfers. And I was under the impression, I think most people were, that all those things were kind of agreed. And yet we still find ourselves in the situation, this uncertainty and this unsettlement behind the scenes resulting in last week's parting of the waves. It just seems a very, very strange situation. And going back to what John said, I'll pick up on one thing he mentioned, which is absolutely right. I think it's a terrible, terrible breakdown in communications. I don't know what level this has been achieved. We're all looking at the Prince, but I don't think Chris was talking to the Prince every day. Certainly not. He would have had conversations on fortnightly or even less than that, maybe. I think it's a chain of command somewhere that's broken down, which has left Chris with kind of thinking, well, I've got no other option here. I can't see things improving. And for the sake of maybe my career and maybe my sanity, I think he's come to this decision. A mutual decision, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, we have to acknowledge there are two sides to every story, and we're all privy to certain things, and we all come from certain perspectives, and we'll have to wait and see what the football club does from here, whether there's a breakup of players in the dressing room or key players. We just don't know. We can't say for certain. We just have to hope that in many cases were proved wrong.
The strange thing about it, Alan, is when a manager leaves a club, it's 99 times out of 100, it's because of results on the pitch. But that's not even the kind of issue, is it? We'd all accepted that the results on the pitch were awful, and we'd all kind of brushed it under the carpet. And Chris has got away with that one, shall we say, in those terms. That's why no one can quite understand what the hell's going on. Because it was not about results on the pitch. We accepted that. We can understand why, for all the reasons already mentioned, especially the injuries, and a little bit of misfortune, and then obviously the season turning out as it has, which has been quite a surreal experience, isn't it? In this COVID fiasco that we've all been subjected to, that hasn't helped as well. So everything that kind of could go wrong has gone wrong this season, but that hasn't resulted in the manager being sacked. It seems to be other issues. Very, very weird.
Well, had COVID not appeared, I'm not even sure we'd be having this conversation. It's obviously wreaked havoc and tragedy in people's lives, and football, by comparison, doesn't really matter. But it's certainly had a big effect on Sheffield United. John, I wrote a piece for the Sheffield Telegraph, Sheffield Star, a week ago, proposing a peace pact, if you like. I was fairly sure what Chris Wilder's stipulations were for staying, and they seemed quite reasonable to me. He was prepared, as far as I'm aware, to see 6 or 7 players leave, not the best players, the big players. He was prepared only to sign players on loan, was prepared not to invest anything on transfers, but simply wanted full control as before of ins and outs, and certainly a start on the training ground. Am I about right in that understanding? And do you think that was reasonable?
I don't know if you're right or wrong, because again, it's not something I've spoken to Chris about. But I don't think you're unreasonable, are you? But as Kevin's just said, it's not through the performances on the pitch that Chris is now no longer managing Sheffield United. It's definitely a lack of communication and a breakdown in communication. I think something else that has to be thrown into that equation as well is the cultural differences between, the owner or owners of football clubs and managers and players. And we've only got to look at the other side of the city, Sheffield Wednesday, and see the cultural differences between the owner there and what's going off. And I think that does play a big part in it as well. That the Prince has come into Sheffield United. I mean, I don't know the back catalogue of it all, but let's say, when did he get involved? 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago. Probably doesn't know much about football. Kevin McKay brought him in. They had the big wranglings about ownership. He won that battle. Suddenly he's the owner of a football club at the top of the Championship, going into the Premier League, and 180, 250 million pound drops in the front door. And it's not a bad place to be in, is it? And if all of a sudden you've then got one of your employees, causing a bit of trouble or saying things that you don't like or not being, how you want them to be, some of these owners take umbrage to that, don't they? And I think that does play a part, not just in Chris's situation, but I think we've seen that across the board. Again, I'm talking about Sheffield Wednesday as well. Look at what happened with Chansiri and Tony Pulis and the breakdown between the relationship there and what came out in the media. And, And I think when you've got football people involved in the game, you know, look at, let's say, Gibson up at Middlesbrough, who understands the game, everything's kept within house, close to his chest, the communication between the manager is good. You know, it does make you start asking questions, really.
Cultural differences is a great point, John. And it strikes me that supporters have not only lost power in the game in terms of being valued or devalued as a source of finance for the game, because football at the top level lives off the media and TV. But also, I wonder if clubs listen to supporters anymore, because if you look across Sheffield Wednesday fans can, you know, scream until they're blue in the face about what they perceive to be problems down there. Doesn't seem to be anything much changing behind the scenes. Sheffield United fans have been shouting until they're red in the face about keeping Chris Wilder, and you know, nothing again has gone in their favour. Are you concerned about that, Kevin, yourself? Because I think years ago, I don't think clubs dared upset the supports of that degree, would they?
Certainly not, Alan. No, looking back 10, 20, 15, 20 years and beyond, yeah, the supporters were vitally important to the whole running of the club, mainly because obviously they provided most of the income. Now, of course, that's no longer the case. In fact, far from it, because the supporter and the actually match day revenue from supporters is a very small percentage, isn't it? It's all about the TV money. So I don't think the fans take enough notice of the supporters, because and I don't take this the wrong way, Sheffield United fans, but our views are irrelevant when it comes to the decisions that are being made at boardroom level. We can scream and shout and moan all we like, but it's not going to make any difference. The people at the top are going to do what they think is, you know, right for themselves, and ultimately, I suppose, right for Sheffield United in a money-making venue, or to push the club forward. And it's really, we're really voiceless. We can protest, but I don't think it's going to change anything, as it's been proved. Just to go back on the communications bit and the cultural difference that John's touched on, I just had a thought in my head there. Perhaps that was part of the problem, that Chris had no go-between to go to the directors on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis. Perhaps he thought that what he wanted wasn't getting through. Perhaps he thought the community got better. And I just mentioned director of football there, which, you know, seems to be a big thing now. 18 of the 20 Premiership clubs have them. We've got teams like Norwich have them, Brentford have had them for years, Barnsley have had one, obviously doing really, really well, looking for promotion now. And of course, we're always mentioned with Burnley. We're always kind of associated with Burnley as a football club. A lot to do with the personality of Sean Dyche there. But they've had a director of football for 3 or 4 years now, and Sean Dyche actually was in the interview process. So it wasn't foisted on him. It wasn't forced on him in any way. He was part of the process, and he was fully in agreement with it. So perhaps whereas Chris was saying, you know, he didn't want one imposed on him, or he didn't want one at the club, maybe that would have helped the whole issue that we faced over the last 18 months, 2 years. Perhaps Chris would still be our manager if he could have worked with somebody in that capacity.
I think that's a fair point, Kevin. For me, I think it depends how you define the director of football role, as long as he's not infringing on the autonomy of the manager. And the noises, by the way, from Sheffield United are that they aren't looking to put a director of football in above the new manager. Although Chris Wilder, we all felt from the signals we were hearing that he did fear that. John, what's your take, finally, for part one, on the point that Kevin's made there?
Directors of football, I think it's difficult to. I mean, he's just brought up about Sean Dyche and Burnley, and credit to him there. I think it's really difficult when you're in a role, you're in a job, and the powers above decide that they want to change the remit or change the setup of the football club. Again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'd find that difficult to take on board. I think there'd be again, there'd have to be lots of communication between, you know, the people who want it and the people who were probably against it, and coming to an agreement. If you go into a football club as a manager and they've already got a director of football and that's already the setup, that's the norm to you, isn't it? So I don't see an issue with that, and I do see the positives in working in tandem with someone, and is that director of football a link between the managing and the coaching staff and the board? Is that not a chief exec's role as well? You know, so different clubs have different setups, don't they? And you know, there's got to be a link between, you know, the people who make the decisions and the people who are off the field and the people who make the decisions on the field. And I think, to me, again, you know, we keep coming back to the same thing. You know, a breakdown in communication, and you know, we see what the results are.
Yeah, in Sheffield United's case, if the model isn't broken, as in the manager's imprint on it, don't fix it. Would appear to be the message. I think the agreement between John and Kevin on that. Chief Executive Stephen Bettis at Sheffield United has been a close ally of Chris Wilder, certainly brokering some kind of peace when the two owners were battling for the club. But at the end of the day, a chief executive, John, just finally in part one, is working for the club and not the manager.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, the old saying, you don't bite the hand that feeds you, do you? You know, and that's why I think that, you know, if there is a breakdown in communication, it's very, very difficult to rope it and reel it back in. And from the outside looking in, you know, that's the only thing that I can put my finger on, really. And when that happens in a football club, at whatever level, we've seen it. You know, Kevin will tell you, I've had it with, you know, as a player with a manager, when your communication with your manager breaks down and you're at loggerheads and the relationship falters, and, you know, we see it across the board.
Well, there's a geographical difference as well, or distance, isn't there? Saudi Arabia to Britain, and you often wonder if two people can be in the same room more often, whether these problems would occur. We're not in the same room either. There's 3 different rooms at home. I've got some roof repairs going on, but the soundproofing seems to have worked, so the roof hasn't fallen in here anyway so far. Jon Newsome, Kevin Gage, and James Gregg will be popping into part 2. Hope you can rejoin us for that. We'll put the focus more on Sheffield Wednesday in that part. See you then.